So I am very pleased to introduce Vasudha Narayanan, Distinguished Professor, UF Department of Religion. Vasu, as she prefers to be called, is, as I said, a distinguished professor in the Department of Religion, and she was elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences in 2023 and is a past president of the American Academy of Religion. She will talk to us today about trade winds and crosswinds in India's historic context. Her primary interests are the Hindu traditions of India, Cambodia, and the United States, including visual and expressive art cultures in Hindu traditions. In recent years, she has focused particularly on Hindu temples and traditions in Cambodia, such as Angkor Wat, during the Khmer Empire from 9th to the 14th centuries. Professor Narayan is the author or editor of 9 books and numerous articles and book chapters, including serving as the associate editor of Brill's Encyclopedia of Hinduism from 2009 to 2024. She attended the universities of Madras and Bombay in India and Harvard University for her PhD in religious studies. Please welcome Vasu Narayan.
Can you hear me at the back? Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me today. And it's a special joy to be here again. I've been here several times and meet old friends. Lovely to see many of you here and to meet new ones. Thank you, Phyllis, for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here today. My talk is on, the top part is being cut. That's okay. It's just the title anyway. It speaks about trade winds and crosswinds. And that's simply to do with the different flows of the wind and whether it helps you or whether there is some static. And here I speak about the flow of culture in different places and in different directions. Everyone knows that it's not just that we live in a globalized culture now, but that people 2,000 years ago lived in a globalized world. And they loved it. They got stuff from places and from people they had never seen, and they prized them. Material goods, knowledge, spiritual knowledge, gold, all the good stuff. But in recent scholarship, and I mean by recent scholarship, the last 100 years, scholars have tended to emphasize the greatness of the influence from Greece and Rome to India, and also from India to Southeast Asia. But cultural relationships are never unilateral. They flow in both ways. And in today's talk, I'd like to speak about Hinduism, not as standing alone, but what can we know about a little bit about Hinduism in and through its contacts with other cultures. And for that, I'd like to emphasize 2 different directions and 4 themes. I'd originally started off with 4 stories, 4 vignettes, gave that up because it became too long and it became a whole series of lectures. So I'm speaking about 3 different topics, and the 4th is simply to raise the question, on cultural and intellectual ownership and property rights. Who owns these ideas? Who owns this art? Who owns these beliefs and practices? And it's closer home than we think. So the first part, out of the four, and this is just a roadmap, is names and connections. And then we'll get into philosophical ideas. The paradox is that philosophical ideas of detachment, immortality of the soul, and so on, actually, the exchange of these ideas came to pass only because of sordid stuff, trade and commerce. It's only because we had trade and commerce that we had the exchange of ideas in astronomy, mathematics, as medicine, as well as philosophical themes. The first few slides will have a lot of text in them, but please don't worry if you're sitting at the back and cannot see it. I'll summarize them. So you don't have to read it. I'll be summarizing the ideas. What will be on the slide is the actual quotation or the source, just to be sure. Well, think of them as citations to show that I've done the due diligence. That's all. So the first is on names and connections. What are these numbers? Arabic numbers, right? And Arabic numerals, which is what we call everything from 1 to 0, despite the names, they're not from Saudi Arabia. And they go back to ancient India. The evolution of these numbers, of course, is complex. It's never a direct line. It started here and it went there. It's much more complex than that. But it did start in India, possibly 3rd century BCE. And then eventually it went into Europe around as late, actually, as the 7th, 8th century CE, a full 1,000 years later. And it went there and was contested in Europe. So because it came from Arabia, from the mathematician Al-Khwarizmi, who wrote the famous treatise Al-Jabr, from which we get the English word algebra. And he introduced the mathematical symbols into the Western world, and so they were called Arabic numbers. But it was not till the 12th or 13th century that it was fully accepted in the Western world, because they resisted it, and the Roman numerals were there for a long, long time. And today, they're universally accepted, but it comes from a combination of many cultural traditions. But meanwhile, what do the Arabs call the Arabic numerals? They call it Arqam Hindiya. Hindiya having the same origins as India. So they call them the Indian numerals. So in Arabic and in many of the languages connected with it, these numerals are called the Indian numerals. And both this word, Hindiya, Indus, India, Hindu, all these words come from the same root. India, Indus, Hindiya, and Hindu. And in the early biblical words, texts, words like hoodoo and so on come on, referring to the same concept. And what is this concept? The Indus Valley, of which we were talking about in lunch today, is a river. The Indus flows through Pakistan today. The name Indus comes from a local word for that river, Sindhu. The word Sindhu appears, about something like 160, 170 times in the earliest Indian text or composition called the Rig Veda. Sindhu. But because of the language pronunciation shift, it's not like they didn't know the word S, but because of the word, the consonant with which it starts, S becomes H at a particular point in history. And so Sindhu becomes Hindu. And so Hindu, which is a name for a religion now, and India, which the Greek called that land, and we'll come to that in a minute, have a common origin from Sindhu. The word Sindhu is the name of a river, the proper noun, as well as a noun. It simply meant river in Sanskrit. And initially, I shouldn't say initially, all the way at least to the 18th century, the word Hindu simply meant Indian, even till the early 19th century. So when a newspaper called Hindu was started in India in the early 1860s, it simply meant Indian. And for a long time, it referred to those Indians who were not Christian, who were not Muslim, but it was a generic word used for all other Indians, inhabitants, even Christians. And all that, so it's like saying Floridian, or not quite Gator, but close. Yeah. And where did India get the name India? A little known figure called Hecate was one of the earliest geographers and historians, and his works are preserved in later texts. His legacy has been long-lasting. He has called this country. Now, never mind that he didn't know exactly where India was, but he called it India, Indoi, Indike, and so on. Okay, so why did I say they didn't know where India was? They kind of said, you went as far as India and you pretty much fell off the face of the earth. And many of them kind of conflated India with Ethiopia. Don't ask me why, but they did. So they did. And there's a long history here, which I loved reading about. And Hecate has probably got it from even earlier from a person called Skylax, the first. So the word may have been even earlier. But remember, the word Sindhu came about around 1500 BC. So all the way from then, we've had the word around. The Greeks called this area in India, and the river Sindhu became Indus. Indu became Indus in Greek. And it led to one of the earliest civilizations in that area. I show this because the Indus Valley civilization traded heavily with Sumer. How do we know it? Well, we just find coins and artifacts from each civilization and the other. As simple as that. As well as people wearing similar headdresses and all that. So that's just to keep in mind. And what are the dates of Indus Valley? It's much later than Egypt. So we're looking here about approximately 3000 BCE, all the way to about 1750 it gave out. And we don't know exactly why it died out, but many many theses about it, possibly because of droughts, mismanagement of crops, and so on. So the first part was simply on names, Arabic numbers on the one hand, and Indian numbers, and how India got its name, and how Hinduism itself gets its name. So the word Hindu as a name for a religious tradition comes from the old Avestan, Persian, and then the Greek version of that. But even though the word Hindu referred to any inhabitant of India, till about the 18th century, 19th even, it was the British who, in their kindness, bestowed the name as for a religion. And this was a little more problematic because the word religion is coming up and being defined in the 19th century. And it's being defined and contained in Europe, even as Europe has sent its colonial scholars out into the different parts of the world. And they're sending in materials, and people are coming up with what is religion. And so modern ideas of religion really go back only till the 19th century. And it's at this point that we have the singularity of religion, and half the world gets left out. What do I mean by that? In China, for instance, one could have Confucian morals, a Taoist philosophy, and Buddhist ritual. In other words, you belong to all three traditions at the same time. And in Hinduism, there's all the isms that you have. Confucianism, Hinduism comes from the idea of religion. In Hinduism, people kind of have shared ideas with multiple traditions. And so you had some, even today, you had some Hindus going to Muslim places of worship called dargahs, where many Muslim saints are enshrined, and they go there. So it's a little bit more fluid in India. However, both with the isms in the 19th century and the politicization of religion, far more with that in the late 20th century, ideas of nationalism, we have the idea of, if you're Hindu, you cannot be Christian. If you're Christian, you cannot, be this. So you belong to one religion and nothing else. But that was not the original idea. But whether it was or not, today, Hinduism as a name and as a culture and as referring to certain things are there, for sure, in a silo. So the second topic I'm getting into is on philosophical encounters. And how did ideas travel alongside trade and commerce? Remember, people are endowing all that money and labor and human power on trade because there's money to be made. And we'll come to that a little later. But alongside with that, people travel. Why? There are pilgrims, there are adventurers, religious zealots who want to spread their ideas, or people who are just curious and want to meet other scholars. So a whole entourage goes along with traders. I begin the story with a very classical ideas. It's that of Alexander the Great. Anyone remember his dates? Close, 323 BC. Yeah, one more digit. 32 plus 323, about that time, right? So the 4th century BC. Alexander the Great had conquered half the world, in his opinion, and had finally come down knocking on the river banks of the river Indus. And when he came here, Alexander met Brahmins. Now, we're not exactly sure who they were, but we think they were people. Remember, there was no Hinduism there, but from this ascetic group, which eventually became a kind of a splinter group from Hinduism. And there are many, many stories told about this. And if you can't read this, I'm going to summarize it for you. The Greek historian Saarinen, who writes about Alexander the Great, writes with great admiration, but the story is not quite, Alexander doesn't come out as well out of it as possible. But Saarinen tries. It is said that Alexander had heard about these wonderful philosophers, and he wanted to know what is it that they had to contribute. So he sends his trusted aide, Onesicritus, and says, hey, go there, find the leader of these Brahmins, these ascetics, talk to him, ask him to come here, meet me. Tell him I'll give him lots of gold. So Onesicritus goes to ask the guys, who is your leader? And they say, there. And Onesicritus thinks it's going to be a person who is really spiritual, looks wonderful. Instead, he finds a guy lying naked on a bunch of leaves, chewing cud, and it's like looking at the sky. And Onesicritus can't believe it. He says, nah, this can't be it. Then says, well, I'll try. Are you Dandamus? Yeah. So get up, get off your hiney, come meet my master, Alexander. Alexander the Great, he'll give you lots of gold and pearls and wisdom, anything you want. And he says, yeah. Well, if you don't, he may chop off your head. Who is this Alexander? You don't know him. He's the greatest king on earth. He's the son of Zeus. He's the son of God. And if you don't come, he'll be mad and angry and kill you and all your followers. And then Damis says, okay, sure. I said, it's okay for him to come and kill you? Yeah. Well, he can't be God. If he's so full of hate and violence, that's not God. My God is filled with love, light, and I follow that one God. And if Alexander is a son of God, I too am a son of God. All of us are. So you're not going to be doing anything. He can't do anything to me. He kills me. So my soul leaves my body. I go get, like changing clothes. I'll get into another body. And he says, but please, please come. If you don't come, he'll cut off my head. Oh, so that's the reason. Well, sorry, your spirit will be free, maybe earlier than mine. And so Onesicritus goes back and tells Alexander, I'm sorry, he's not coming. And he says he's the son of God too. And I asked him to come and meet the conqueror of the world. And he says, I'm a conqueror too. That's what Dandamus said. And Alexander says, he said he's a conqueror. Conqueror of what? Well, sorry, sir. He said he conquered the desire to conquer the world. So that's where he is. So Alexander's pretty intrigued by this point. So according to Aryan, he goes there and meets with Dandamis. Hey, you. And Dandamis is like, yeah. And come on, I'll give you anything you want. And Dandamis says, there's nothing you have that I want. And anything I have, you don't want it anyway. That's philosophical knowledge. So I'm not going to go anywhere with you. And it said that they did have a discussion, and Alexander spared him his life, supposedly, and left. And on his way back, he meets all of Dandamis's followers. And they're standing silent. And what are they doing? All of them are silent and they're stomping their feet like you. They're just marching where they stand. And so Alexander asked Onesicritus, hey, what are they doing? Well, they can't talk because they have a vow of silence. And they're so self-controlled, they're not going to talk. But what is the message that they're trying to pass with their stomping their feet? And Onesicritus says, the message is simple. They say, all that you need, all that any human being needs, is 2 footsteps of land to stand on. That's it. You're standing, your feet are planted on 2 feet, planted on the ground. That's all the ground you need in the world at any point. This world, they say, is not yours. This earth belongs to someone else. And after you go, it will belong to someone else. So it's not yours. And you only need these 2 footsteps of land, 2 footprints, and eventually 2 cubitfuls deep when you'll be buried. That's all you need. Beyond that, they say, you, Alexander, have traveled half the world, created misery for the entire world with your soldiers raping, pillaging, killing. And you troubled all of civilization. You've destroyed half of civilization and let them destroy your soul. Are you happy? And it is said Alexander had a conversation with them, asked them several questions, and that's a long talk in itself. And eventually, he goes back. He begs Dandamis to go back with him, and Dandamis says, oh, my dead body. And one of his disciples decides to go and find out, and then gets sick and wants to ritually kill himself and does. And all that's in Greek, recorded by Greek historians. So the idea is this, the idea of detachment and self-sufficiency, immortality of the soul, all this is repeated one more time in the story of the encounter between the Indians and Alexander the Great. However, this idea of India being connected with self-negation or detachment comes from about that time when it becomes a stereotype for many people, which persists. The ideas, however, of immortality of the soul and many other philosophical themes, including reincarnation of the soul, the immortality, the idea that the soul passes on over and over again, comes up much earlier in Indian texts and is also probably traveled with trading groups to Greece, and it is hard, they say, to read Plato and much later other philosophers without thinking that they had some contact with the Indian world. And the exact details of that contact are still being worked out by scholars. A great book is by Thomas Machiavelli, Mcevilli, written about 30 years ago. So while this conversation highlights the importance of detachment, a conversation between Dendamus and Alexander, the ideas of detachment and so on became a stereotype of Indian philosophy. Now, that is not obviously true, even though everyone characterizes Hinduness and Indianness with detachment and spiritual stuff. That was not there. Initially, Hindu life, supposedly, and not even normative, it's ideal, was supposed to have been a student. When you didn't work, you didn't earn, society had to educate you. And that was the idea. You stayed with your teacher, and it was the dharma, the duty of society to educate people. But as a married person, householder, one was supposed to earn money and fulfill and give away, or dispense with all the debts of your life, including supporting those students and other people, and retire to the forest and being an ascetic. Most people never went beyond a householder. So the idea is it was perfectly okay in the Hindu tradition to go out, earn money, and get yourself a lot of money. So the ideas of detachment and not getting money, which Dendamus spoke about, is there, but as an ideal. And that's about it. So I wanted to dispel that and put it where it belongs, rather than say that's what Indian philosophy was about. However, there was a lot of exchange in idea of astronomy, particularly strong in astronomy. And texts were written actually crediting each other in Indian astronomy. Actually, why did they study astronomy? It's for astrology, because they wanted the exact time and auspicious times to start things. The Indian astronomers gave credit to the Roma school of thinking and then the Egyptian schools of thinking, and gave different ideas, and medicine between South Asia and the Greco-Roman Empire. Why do I include all this with terms of religion? Because the word Vedas, which is the name of the earliest texts in Hinduism, is a very wide word. It simply means knowledge. And Vedas included many branches of knowledge, including the ideas of astronomy, mathematics, and architecture, and so on. So it was a kind of a wide-ranging word without a narrower definition for religion at that point. And all this was enabled by global trade. The strong evidence of trade all the way from 3000 BCE, way back. And the trade routes are just stupendous. They crawl all over the map. Everyone knows about the Silk Route. That's icing. That's just a small little part of the network. There are maritime routes. There are incense routes. There are all kinds of routes. And why? Because Greece and Rome wanted pepper to preserve their meat, spices, and from India, they wanted ivory, gems, pearls, and jewelry. And some of the Greek historians write, my God, the Roman people, they're insatiable for the Indian jewelry and stuff like that. And what did the Indians want from Greece and Rome coming through Egypt? Gold. Tons of gold. The ships would come with gold and good wine. I'm not kidding you. Tamil poetry 2000 years ago speaks about kings who love those Yavanas. Yavana means foreigner, comes from Ionian and foreigner. And they come with wine, and these kings give an arm and a leg for the right year, right there. And so the strong trade routes, and the ships came with all of this, and they went back laden with crates and crates of what they call black gold, that's black pepper. And there's poetry, inscriptions, all stuff from 2000 years back attesting to it. And the periplus, the different trip advisors of the time gave you detailed ideas of where the ships should stop, the maritime journals, and what they should get. But these strong trade routes led to financial, political, and other connections, as well as religious connections. So it's the paradox that it's the trade routes and the money and the commerce stuff that actually lead to the flow of philosophical ideas of detachment and non-possession. Other material objects have also gone. This very voluptuous statue is called the Pompeii Lakshmi, a goddess name, but actually she's just the generic celestial figure. And she was found near Pompeii, actually. And there are many more that have been found in Middle East recent years. And the most recent evidence of material evidence remember, Egypt is like a halfway place on the way to the Greco-Roman Empire, right? And the most recent evidence of Brahmi Tamil script came 4 days ago, literally 4 days ago. This is a headline, how the pharaoh's tombs in the Valley of the Kings had graffiti in the Tamil language, early language. And that was the fun part to read about it. I'm happy to say one of my friends from France who was a lead investigator in this, Charlotte Schmidt. And her paper was read and it made the headlines in many places. I mean, yes, they had a lot of Roman graffiti. There was a lot of Roman people there. And they also had this. And so gold and wine came, as I said, and went back with black pepper, ivory, and other exotic wares. So what was being traded? Pearls, good stuff, all the different things that you can see here, or not. So India is at that very auspicious point in the map where things come from Rome and Egypt, and they stop in India, and the sailors take a vacation. And then the next shift goes on to Southeast Asia. So by 200 BCE, Roman beads have been found in Okayo, that is in the southern tip of Vietnam and Cambodia. 200 BC. Just casual stuff and archaeological stuff. So we think we're globalized today. Boy, we ain't seen nothing yet. Those people were masters of the game. So India became the central node in the international system of sea trade that brought together the portion of Western Europe, the Mediterranean basin, Egypt and the Red Sea, and Southeast Asia. Now, the third and eventually the fourth part of my talk, and I'll wind up with that. India's contacts with Southeast Asia. I'll focus just on Cambodia. Recognize this temple? Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat is near Siem Reap in Cambodia. Angkor comes from the Sanskrit word Nagara, which simply means city. Wat is courtyard. It was built by Suryavarman II, 12th century. It was a Hindu temple when it was built. Today it's Buddhist. It's the only Hindu temple on the national flag. But it's also on beer cans. Yeah, I mean, that's a national symbol on police labels and so on. Boarding cards. It is the national symbol. The longest Sanskrit inscription in the world is found in Southeast Asia, not in India. So how did all this begin? Well, Chinese texts speak about two different kingdoms in Southeast in Cambodia, but the local stories speak about a king or a prince. Some say a sage, a holy man came from India and married a Naga. Naga is a serpent princess from Cambodia. And their children populate Southeast Asia today. So the story becomes emblematic of a combination of cultures of South and Southeast Asia. That's the point. And along with these people come different stories of Hinduism and Buddhism. So these are the earliest empires which the Chinese texts speak about. Because of time limitation, I'm going to show you just one little part of Cambodia, one small time period. This is Angkor. Welcome to Angkor, my second home. At any given time, it's beautiful. During monsoon time in June and July, it's spectacular. This is what the sky looks like there at that time. Now, never mind, it's 100 degrees outside, and with the humidity, you feel you're walking in a sauna, but apart from that, it's fine, right? So the temple was dedicated to Vishnu, a Hindu god. So what do we know about Hinduism so far? We know the origin of the name. We know that it emphasizes both creation of wealth as well as detachment. And it speaks about the ultimate state, detachment and not being connected to the fruits of your labor as an ultimate end. It thinks of that as important. What else will we know about Hinduism? It worships a god called Vishnu. And the temple Angkor Wat was built by Surya Varma. The name Surya means sun. And this is a portrait of Surya Varman on the southern side of Angkor Wat. Today, Angkor is a Buddhist shrine, a temple. But when it was built, it was dedicated to the Hindu god Vishnu. And it has 5 peaks of 5 towers, 4 on 4 sides, and the 5th in the middle. And it's built like many Hindu temples, like this, 4 on 4 towers, the 5th one in the middle. But since Angkor faced west, the French had thought it was a funerary monument. And that's not true. They came there, this is just too much of Egypt in their minds. It was a regular temple, and many temples in South India face west. And along with trade come people bearing 3 different sectarian affiliation. Belief in the Hindu god Vishnu, belief in the Hindu god Shiva, and belief in Buddhism, Buddha. So those were the 3 main divisions in Angkor in the early stages. An 8-armed Vishnu became very popular in worship. Here he is undergoing plastic surgery. Very handsome, 6th century, this guy. Very good-looking guy. And an 8-armed Vishnu was the center of Angkor Wat also. Today he has a Buddha head. They lopped off the head and lopped off the arms and put Buddhist arms and Buddhist head. But other than that, it's there. And you have many of the 8-armed Vishnu in traffic circles today, modern replicas. You also have a reclining Vishnu. So if you go hike up a mountain, a hill, you'll see these. A reclining Vishnu. And he's reclining on a snake. And one of the largest bronze reclining Vishnus was found in the middle of this artificial reservoir. I took this picture from the plane. And it was built in the 10th, early 11th century. Yeah, 11th century. And in the middle of this lake, artificial reservoir, was an island in which they built a huge bronze Vishnu, like 25, 26 feet long. And it was found in the 1930s inside a well and preserved in the National Museum in Phnom Penh. But so many little fragments were found along with it. And they sent it to France 2 years back, and they had it all assembled in different parts. And this is what it looks like now, the bronze Vishnu. And it was in Minnesota till last month. And it's now on its way. He is now on his way, huge one, to the Smithsonian, where the exhibit will open with this reclining Vishnu next month. And it'll go on till September, I think. So if you can go to the National Museum of Asian Art, Smithsonian, anytime you will see this. He occupies this entire, like a huge part of the room. And he's reclining. And look at this particular carving from the 8th century. I'll show you this. And a dancer from Tampa showing the same position. He is reclining on a snake. And the serpent is a good guy in Hindu civilization. So that's straight off. Vishnu means immanent, all-pervasive. And Ananta, that's the name of the snake, means without end, infinity. So the name of the snake is Ananta, and the all-pervasive one reclines on that which is on time, which is infinite. That's the message you get the minute you look at the picture. Vishnu, all-pervasive, Ananta, infinity. So he, the supreme deity depicted there, is the master of space and time. And that's the kind of impression, that's the first off message that you get. So that's the image which will come to the Smithsonian. These deities were much prized and worshipped in Cambodia. Imagine having 25, 30 feet bronze. The metallurgy was excellent at the time. Last section. So all this flow of ideas, artifacts, and so on. Who owns these ideas, these artifacts, these practices, this art? Who owns this? Think Elgin marbles. Not Greece. The British Museum said, more people see it here, we're better suited to show it. So sucks to be you. That's pretty much what they told Greece when Greece asked for it back, right? Dawn, I think this is a topic you like, the repatriation of stolen art and music. So I just wanted to show you this lintel. And it shows Vishnu standing on Garuda. It's a beautiful lintel, which I saw at the Musée Guimet in Paris. I loved it. I saw him first in 2000, 2001, 2000, yeah. And I just loved it. And I wanted to see the place where this was found. I read up the inscriptions. And when I could go in 2002, I made a pilgrimage to that place. And it was past this reservoir. And this is what the temple looks like. Everything's gone. And had not the French looted this and preserved it, I would not have seen it. Okay, so I'm not talking in favor of loot, but it is to be kept in mind. It was there in safekeeping. I showed you this picture a few minutes back. It's way up in the hills where you hike up. And you see this beautiful Vishnu reclining on the snake. This was on one side, and this was in December 2002. But that April of that year was very dry. So this is what it looked like. The same, this all water, none of it was there. This was December. This was April of the same year. Dry. But look at him carefully. When I went the following year, he had been vandalized. Why? Because there is a market for this in first world countries, in private ownership. I've been visiting the same Vishnu, even though it's like a 2-hour trek up the hills. And over the years, they have plastered it up, and this is how they eventually kind of plastered it. And today, there is a new part there. But a lot of the looted material from Cambodia came through a particular person called Latchford, who Douglas Latchford moved in the highest of circles, highest of financial circles. And he looted and looted from Cambodia. And a business partner, Emma Bunker, certified them as true and authentic, and also passed on phonies along with it. A lot of it was in the collection of billionaires in Miami. The co-founder of Netscape and others, Lindemann, and all these were there in their homes, displayed. And these pictures are from Architectural Digest. For heaven's sake, they were public with all of this. And eventually, Latchford was indicted. And even though he lived in the top circles, he was eventually indicted and died. Some of this looted art, you wouldn't believe it. You can't make this stuff up. Has shown up in the Epstein files. I'm not kidding you. Yeah, because some of them have sold it to him, and he was advisor to some of these people. So scholars have been wondering what happened to these artifacts. And lo and behold, they are there in those files. Even the redacted one. Who cares about redacting that stuff out? So the documentary is on YouTube available called Loot, and they show how this stuff has come out. In 2005, when I went to the National Museum of Phnom Penh, I saw this body of a Hindu god called Harihara. Look at the wall. You see a little paper poster there. It's just a little Xerox black and white thing. And it's the picture of the head. And it shows you where the head is. And it tells you very clearly where the head is. And the head was in Musée Guimet in Paris. But there's no sign next to this head telling you where the body is. A few years back, the French and the Cambodians exchanged things, even though this belonged to Cambodia. And so the French museum returned this in exchange for something else. And this went back to the National Museum. And there was great celebration in 2016, 10 years back, when the head was returned. And last December, when I went, I was able to see this whole body now in the new National Museum. And so on that very auspicious note, I will leave you, but with only one question in mind. Any of you do yoga? Or chair yoga? Okay. I just wanted to leave you with this question. We can talk about looted artifacts, but what about yoga and concrete stuff like that? It was once part of the Indian spiritual tradition. But now there's Torah yoga, there's Yahweh yoga, Christian yoga, Wiccan yoga, Zen yoga. Real men do yoga. My favorite is Star Wars yoga. So who does yoga belong to is a question. A final word about yoga. It was big during the time of the Obamas. So Easter Bunny was doing the Virabhadra Asana in the White House Easter lunch, Easter picnic. And so the last word of this was, yoga has become the universal language of spiritual exercise. And so the flow of ideas goes on. You relabel things, and instead of it being Hindu or Buddhist or Jain, it's now spiritual or it's good for your health. So it's taken out completely, repurposed, and regifted to humanity in a different way. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful. So inspiring to learn more. So comments, questions? Oh, come on. I know you're all just stunned.
Thank you so much for staying on and hearing me. The gift of time is the most valuable, and I truly appreciate your taking the time out.
Good. Well, thank you so much for a fabulous presentation. When I was listening to your story about Alexander the Great meeting the Indian philosopher, it reminded me of a short story that Tolstoy wrote called "How Much Land Does a Man Need?" And the response was, at the end of the story, 6 feet, enough to be buried. That's it. And I'm not sure that very many people recognize the link with the Alexander the Great story.
Thank you for that fabulous comment. May I tell you another story back? Indians never answer questions. They only tell stories. So they say, oh, let me tell you a story. And you ask another question, then let me tell you a story. Tolstoy did a lot of that, repurposing. And he wrote a fabulous story about, he read about a story from the life of saints and loved it, that he kind of converted his life path. And the story that he read about, and which he wrote about eventually, is a story of a particular saint. And this saint, it is said, fell into a well, and was deep down was a big dragon. And if he let go the branch that he was clutching on to, he would fall straight into the dragon. And so he's clutching on to the branch of the tree, and that tree was being eaten away by 2 rats, a white one and a black one. And out of that tree was a big beehive, and a drop of honey fell. And the man stuck out his tongue and enjoyed that drop of honey, and it was so sweet. And he didn't mind the mice eating away the tree and his having to fall into hell. The white and the black mice are, of course, day and night. And the man shows the predicament of every human being with hellfire below. And yet we want to stick out our tongue and enjoy that drop of honey. And this story shows of the man who saw it became Saint Josephat. He was taken out of the canon in the 19th century, but you can Google him, Josephat. And Gandhi read the story and was inspired and called his farm Tolstoy Farm. But the story that Tolstoy read was not, and St. Josephat was not Roman. It came from the Middle East, and the Greeks called him Iosaph or Iodasaph, and they got it during the Crusades from the Middle East, where he was called Eudasaph, the protagonist, and they got it from the Manichaean sources, who got it from Buddhist sources, where the original story is about a Buddha wannabe called Bodhisattva. And the Bodhisattva became Saint Josephat. When this was pointed out to the Catholic Church in the 19th century, oops, gone out. But the story, nevertheless, of Tolstoy being inspired by it influenced Gandhi, so it came full circle back to India.
Okay. Okay, so this would be an opportunity for another story, I'm sure, but
I promise. I'll try not.
well, I feel very ignorant. I should know the answer. Why does Vishnu, if I have this correct, have 8 or more arms?
Good question. And, not too many people know the answer to it. And I certainly don't have the answer. And the thing is, of course, in Hinduism, there's no one correct answer. There's a range of answers. And the number 8 is associated with Vishnu, but multiple arms for any deity is interesting. And some people say it's to do with omnipotence and power. And it's to show that, like how any human being feels in the morning when they're rushing out to do everything. I wish I had 100 arms. That's the feeling that you get from these arms. So that's one interpretation. Another interpretation is that each arm holds a particular attribute, a lotus, a wheel, a ninja wheel kind of thing, a weapon. And each one of these emblems or attributes, as the art historians call them, conveys a particular meaning to them. They have multiple arms, multiple heads sometimes, and is to show omnipotence or super exaggerated powers at any time. And I'll tack on another answer, even though you didn't ask the question, but I'll answer it. I'll answer the question that you didn't ask anyway. Why are some of these gods blue in color? And Krishna is dark blue. The word Krishna actually means black. Black, as in the color. And the story is that, or the interpretation which is most popular, is that he's called Megha Shama, dark as a cloud, as a thunderous cloud. And that's not ominous in the Hindu tradition. That's life-saving. Because in India, where you're given to drought and you're given to the heat waves, rain is life-giving. And it nourishes the land and nurtures your soul. So it is believed that to have the rain come at the right time vivifies the ardor, the faith in your soul. And yet you don't know when that grace will come. The weatherman will be saying 100% rain, and there'll be dark clouds, and they keep passing on. They don't stop. And then suddenly, out of the blue, you get a rain. So it's almost arbitrary. So we can never be sure when the divine grace will come according to the Hindu traditions. But to remind you that a divine being is filled with this grace, you have that kind of color. That's one interpretation. And the poet Rabindranath Tagore, who won a Nobel Prize around 1913, I think, for literature, he uses that metaphor quite a lot, Rabindranath Tagore.
If I may,
Sheila has.
well, I've got the microphone.
Okay.
What is the association between Vishnu and water? So, because I've seen
Yes.
in Kathmandu, Vishnu in
Vishnu,
pond.
yes, and he's reclining on the snake right there, lying down
Yes.
on that. The word, another name for Vishnu is Narayana, which means of the waters. He is connected with the waters and the god Shiva with the mountains. And they don't say why, but the word Narayana comes from the waters and my last name. And it means, it's another name of Vishnu. We name our children, Hindus name the kids after gods and goddesses because it's supposed to get good karma by calling the name. So, just by saying my name today, my name Vasudha means earth goddess. Yeah, you can call me goddess for short. Yeah, anytime. Right. So just by saying my name, you get 100 good karma points right there. You're welcome.
Vasu, thank you for that rich and intriguing presentation. As you know, there are some folks who think about Western civilization and the Western canon as monolithic, and that is
Really?
impervious of influence from the outside, etc. And I think one could not have seen your talk without being disabused of that idea. And that is a wonderful theme to talk about and show the fluidity between civilizations, whether materially or culturally, etc. So it was very good talk.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Sheila is one of my oldest professional friends from UF, and we went through the teething trouble of word and word perfect and folk shift or some in the early 80s together.
Speaking of art theft, PBS, Public Broadcasting, had 2 episodes of a program called Plunderer, which was about the Nazis' organized theft of every piece of art they could get their hands on during the Second World War. That's going to be shown here with the Art League on Tuesday Tuesday of, what's the next month? April, March and April. So just to let you know.
Was another famous movie, The Golden Girl, The Woman in Gold, right? I remember the gold part, right? Very captivating story.
Now that I've interrupted people, more questions?
No, you just have to go
Comments?
through, at least in many parts of the world, they tell you it was from the plundered Nazi times. But if you go to the museums in St. Petersburg in Russia, the whole museum of the Impressionist art and room after room, and they'll say from wartime Germany.
Yeah, that's right. They stole
Very
it from the Germans.
euphemism.
So, anybody? No? Well, thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you once again for being here.